and I look forward to more of the same. So, Chimigwich.
Abujo, Gigiano Kutuk, Dishna Cosmo Quadudum, say Chimigwich for rolling and inviting me as a community member for the Lands and Resources. I felt very overwhelmed, very appreciative to be able to take the opportunity to sit here and listen to our past chiefs and to Hardy loads of wisdom and information that is so important that we don't get to hear too often, which is a shame sometimes. And I think that I agree with Councillor Mary Jo Wabno when we talk about we need to educate our young ones. We've gone through such a cultural genocide in our people across Canada that we've lost some basic, simple ways of life of listening and patience to have our children sit around the table like this. Now it's media, and I think that sometimes we have to use that to our benefit to educate our future generation. As I was listening to our former chief speak, I couldn't help but feel that time is changing and that something is in the air and that something is happening. And that we need to take a look at the earth, the sky, and the moon and listen to what is happening and the changes that are happening. Because there is a change happening, and I think that we need to act upon that. As caretakers of the earth, that was our responsibility as Anishinaabe people, that we have strayed away from that, and we need to reclaim that. We talk about inherent right to self-determination. I think we must become that now. We must become self-determined. We can't just talk about it. And that I think we as people need to take back control and stand up for what is ours, and as opposed to fighting what belongs to us, but what is ours. And that not only to the land, but to the water. We look at the amount of fish that have gone from our waters, and we need to also take a look at the water base, because we know that we have to buy water now. Who would ever thought there would be a day when we would have to do that? That the water is not clean anymore for us. And that's in our time, and we still have to look at our future grandchildren and the ones yet unborn. What are we going to be able to leave them? What will be the legacy of this generation? I think we need to take a stronger stand, and I don't know how that is, but I think by educating and bringing the people together, and we talk about lighting that fire, I think we need to do that. When I think about the 1998 decision by Ontario Justice, who talked about the caution that the government of Canada needs to take, or the province needs to caution anything that's happening here, and I don't know that that's happening, because as I continue to travel around the island, and there's lots of development going on, there's lots of land that's being sold, and Chief Eugene talked about how our lands are being sold to people that aren't from our country, and I think we can't just be idle about that. I think we need to find a way to stop that process. Again, I say miigwech for this beautiful day, and miigwech for Chief Hazel for being here and for the work that she does. Miigwech.
I'm very excited to hear about this meeting that was taking place here today. I was involved with this committee since 1984 right to 1996 when we took this to court injunction. And the reason why we did that was to stop the sales of lands within those islands, like my fellow band member said. And you know, I was really disappointed to hear later that this was sent back to specific claims. And you know, that's just another process how the government will toy with us in regards for their process. And when the specific claims came and told us that we weren't eligible to go through that route. But you know, when Mr. O'Neill and the negotiation committee sat at this table in Wiki, that you know, we had a bigger claim besides the 41 islands, which was the 42nd island, which was Manitoulin. And you know, that was one of our negotiation tools that we had in order to get the 41 islands on the table with the federal government and the provincial government. And now to go back to specific claims again and to see and hear the federal government doesn't have a negotiator set in place for us. You know, that's just another tactic for them to play with us. And even when they did the amalgamation back in 93, 94, I was really upset in regards to that amalgamation because I knew for a fact, I even informed my leadership in regards to how this process was going to take place, how the third-party interest group was going to be more complicated to address these issues as cottage owners in that area and real estate companies in regards for the land that they're selling. And you know, for us to open our doors and our homes to mayors of Little Curd and across Manitoulin, and for them to stand in front of us and tell us that they obligate our treaty rights, they obligate our negotiation, our land claims, and in turn, they still claim the islands, even regardless of how we treated them to accept them in our council chambers. And for us to be very passive of what's been taking place in the last 30 years is really phenomenal. And then that's just for my part of the 30 years. That's not counting what our fellow former chiefs went through since '74, formalizing. And even the Kanoshmek map identifies how much islands that we were occupying. And this is the word occupying. That's all we were doing was occupying on these islands. And they were still ours. And basically, in regards from the islands from Sault Marie to Panettanguishing, Wikwemikoong has every right in regards to those islands because of the 1836 treaty. Because we never obliged with the 1850 treaty. The people that came from that 1850 treaty was forced down to Wiki and that. So we as a community have to be more assertive in regards to saying this is our islands. And if we're going to be standing by in regards to going through this process with the federal government and provincial government, to let us know, we'll have to wait and see how we can get this person in place. It's just another ploy for us to be going another 10 years. When we put this court injunction, that stopped everything in regards for any activities that take place in those 41 islands. And when that court injunction was lifted, when the government came back and told us, they opened that door again to make this island claim more complex. It is now. It's going to be more complicated for us to be able to get negotiations with the third-party groups. So we, as a community member, and I'm sitting with this issue for this amount of years, I would like to see more assertiveness within the community to get these islands settled. And as my point of view, the only islands that we should be negotiating in regards for loss of usage or compensation is the ones that's patented. The islands that's been sold by the government. There's not too many of them on those 41 islands where we're in the claim itself. But as far as those islands that's not being occupied by non-natives or whatever, those islands should be referred back to Wiki automatically, no matter what. In regards for the islands that's been sold, those are the negotiations process that we should be just basically dealing with. In regards for the date of 1895 usage, well, you know, we all know Wiki understands only the 1836 treaty. That's all we always went by, and that's all what I see in regards to talking to the community, that's all we recognize is the 1836 treaty. As far as the education goes, I've made every effort to the high schools in regards to, like, for my own free time. I go up there. If a teacher wants to do some native language or native talking in regards, or even storytelling, I usually go up there a lot. And people see me there a lot, almost every day. That's the reason I am there, is educating the grade 9s, the grade 10s. This last week, I went to one class. They wanted to do storytelling. I didn't know what the storytelling was. They could talk about Bush and all that stories. But basically, I got into how Manitou Island was existed. And I got into the 1836. I talked about the proclamation that Henry was talking about, and explained to those kids that they have rights, and our ancestors have been protecting our rights ever since we've been here. And you know, to identify the 1836 and the 1850 and the 1862 treaty with these children, you know, they're really amazed in regards to how the attention span that they have to understand, to get somebody in front of them to explain to them what these are. So yes, it is very important to get our education system to understand where Wiki's history is. And you know, it doesn't take much to go to high school as an individual and approach a teacher and you know, to invite you to their curriculum in regards to identify any of these, like even the endangered species. You know, these are things that we need to do as a community, open up our channels and do a lot of networking in order for us to be able to be stronger as a community and fight these issues that we're dealing with as a group. Miigwech.
No, I was going to ask him, you know, to explain the difference of the proxy model and the old model that we use in Point Grondine. The proxy model is more simpler. It doesn't take that long, you know, to wrap up the negotiations, you know. While the other system, you know, it's a time-consuming thing, you know, to check every island, you know, see how much it's worth and stuff like that, you know. But the proxy model, you don't have to do that. That is the difference. And I want to thank everybody, you know, that showed up today. I think we've learned quite a bit, you know, and we have a better idea which way to go now. So
our second day of these discussions here when it comes to the specific land claim regard to the 41 plus islands. Even that very process, as we went around the table here yesterday, there's specific things that we need to do, but overall, the general, what I was able to, I guess in summarizing the discussions yesterday, is this general overview of really how critical understanding our history is, and certainly our chiefs that are with us today set the tone for us and again advised with the utmost guidance that we need to ensure that we thoroughly understand what our history is, and knowing that that we have this guidance today, that it's going to be up to each and every one of us as individuals to take the time and read and visit to get a true picture, our own perspective of what our history is, and not someone else tell us what it is. And that's why I think it's so, I think we're so fortunate again to have Chief Ronald here and Chief Henry, and we have Hardy here. We had Chief Eugene speak, and when each of them did speak yesterday, that the emphasis again is that again we like this fight way, and we keep it strong. So when we move forward, that we're moving collectively as opposed to leaving this initiative and leaving this initiative and this responsibility with maybe just 4 or 3 people, but it has to be a collective as far as all of our band membership. Yesterday, the other is, in the closing remarks yesterday anyway, as far as everything that was discussed, I think, if anything, those that have been very involved in the past, since even the initial land claim settlement of Point Grandine, but there's a good number of us here, I think we're enlightened really how rich our history is, and that's I guess the fire, the light that's kind of being sparked, or we're being enlightened again that really when it comes to the history, that it's very critical and essential, because I think as Nishnawbek, that's who we are, and when we get a better sense of what that is, even through learning our history, and not only our culture and our language, but then I feel, again, very confident that when it comes to making this change or revitalizing in a more healthy way, because again, when it comes to all of the issues that we're faced with today is stemming from maybe not so much a loss of self-identity, but there's confusion, and when we can empower our people with this beautiful, this rich history and beautiful culture and language, then all the best to each and every one of us of Wikwemikoong. There's a lot of things to consider, but most important that we need to, I guess, reestablish how we are going to move forward with the specific land claim, and again, when it comes to due process, that we're in this negotiation phase, and if it's a time where we need to maybe opt to go into the court process itself, then we're going to determine that as a community together, and within to take advantage of what funding is there to again inform the community what this is all about, and they're certainly very much involved in this process. So that's
in the Martin clan. There are still a lot of ancestors of these various clans living on our reserve. For instance, all the Flamas de Vamquays are part of the Wolf clan. Hardy, his ancestors are from the Deer clan, Orskish. I myself and all the Mantuabis are from the Bear clan. So Kanoshmeg, Tumak Kanoshmeg, for all intents and purposes, was only a sub-chief among the 21. And that's an absolute fact, because that's the way the clan system works. So there's been too much emphasis on this sketch by Tumak Kanoshmeg. He had no right to speak on behalf of the 20 other chiefs at that time. It was only a suggestion. What he thought was the fishing territories of our people. Our fishing territory extended as far as the Bruce Peninsula. Not that small area that Tumak Kanoshmeg made up in a sketch. In fact, there's some question as whether that sketch is accurate or the original that Tumak Kanoshmeg purportedly drew up. But that's only a fishing map. It doesn't include any islands, Georgian Bay, the North Shore of Lake Huron, and south of Manitoulin. There are some other islands that are not even listed in our claim, which is the Duck Islands on the south side of Manitoulin Island. Those were never surrendered either. So don't rely too much on this Tumak Kanoshmeg as the governance bargaining tool. It's not worth the paper it's drawn on, as far as I'm concerned. Remember, he was only a sub-chief and had no right to determine our territory on behalf of the 21 other chiefs and the whole clan memberships. Knew it.
Which, Chief Ronnie?
Miigwech, good morning, and miigwech to Stephen. I'm glad you can be here today. Yesterday we were talking about the different dates and back to October and more recently a council meeting looking at this proxy model and trying to look at a date where we can start basing loss of use of the islands and looking at the sold islands. So my question, I guess, to Stephen is, in your opinion, as a friend, what would be a starting date when we look at this proxy model? Yesterday, I felt that we should go back to 1836 and look at the islands that we obviously did not relinquish and give up to the government. So when we look at a starting date to use this proxy model, in your opinion, would it be 1836 or prior to that? Maybe.
I haven't studied your proxy documents being away, and perhaps I don't understand the full question, but I'm going to give an answer this way. One way of looking at it is, well, the first sales of islands, Mary Jo, out there start happening about 1881. The Great Lacloche Island was sold in 1881, and it set off a dispute between Ontario and Canada as who had the right to patent that island. Ontario said, we own the islands from Parry Sound to the Sioux, and the government of Canada said, we had the right to issue that patent. The very next year, Strawberry Island was number 2. We've studied this, and so on and so forth. So, before 36, there's a sense that the people used and occupied lands, as Ronnie would say, as per custom and tradition. I haven't seen anything that said any islands were sold from 36 to 62. I'll talk a moment very briefly on Victor Letwin's interruption of the fishery and then the incursion on the fishery as per a loss of use. But if no islands were sold before 62. And then, so from 36 to 62, there's islands out there and protected under the 36, one would think. 62 comes along and that arrangement gets changed. And then portions of Manitoulin get patented. Hardy, when's the first patent on Manitoulin? Shortly after 62?
64.
Yeah, so 1864. Lots of sales start happening in this territory, Mary Jo. And as I say, the first large island in Lake Huron that sold in this territory was 1881, Great Lacloche. So some people might say the start date is 62 because that's where sort of the change came down without your consent. And that's when the arrangements that you did not agree to changed. And that's where lands start getting sold on Manitoulin Island as soon as 1864. I guess some surveyors had to come in. But before that, of course, there's non-native incursion into the fishing territory, and Victor Letwin has prepared an article saying there's a loss of use happening here by the issuing of these leases and licenses to outsiders to come in fish in your territory. So when you do your loss of use with specific claims, for sure you're going to analyze the loss of the fishery, for starters. And it begins before 1862. And Victor Letwin is a good resource for you there. I think he starts tracing those incursions back 1840, 1830. I don't know those dates off the top of my head now, but he has the, Rolly, you have that, Victor Letwin's article. So he's a very important person for loss of use of the fishery before 1862. But then as per loss of use of other things, apart from the fishery, if the islands were there and if your people used them till 62, and if you use the resources, maybe 62 is the start date where something dramatic changed. That's the dramatic change date. That's when, against your will, changes were made on the 36 arrangement. That's when you didn't assent. So I'm sorry I'm not up to date on your proxy analysis. Mary Jo, in some respects, it is a technical administrative question to be argued out at the negotiating table. It is a substantive issue in the sense that the earlier you go back, the greater is the loss of use. I would view that now as more or less technical and administrative. There'll be some give and take with the negotiators at the table. You'll push the government back as far as they can. They'd like to push you into the future and say, well, there was no loss of use until last year, more or less. So you'll want to push it back as far as you can. It's a good thing to grapple with at the negotiating table.
What I see, you know, I haven't worked on this area for a long time, is when Columbus set foot on this land, we started losing it. We have documented since 1400s the first setting up the non-native people on Turtle Island. This is when we started losing it. But for the sake of administrative areas like Steve has talked about, probably around 1836. Now that brings a question to my mind. Roland, maybe you can straighten us on this later or today. I always believed when I started working with the islands claim 34, 35 years ago, one of the things, the biggest loss was of course the islands and our livelihood. Why we were put was fisheries. I have documented, and I don't know where it is, I've tried to look there recently, maybe this gentleman can help us out and retrieve those documents. I did a study totally, fully on the loss of fisheries around our islands here, especially on the south end. Tons and tons of fish. That was our livelihood. They took it away from us and we went hungry. And I mentioned that at the council meeting not too long ago. We had to go across the bay and bump for fish there from other white fishermen. Stupid, crazy, we lost. Now, again, the government who is paying or providing us money are saying, God, I hope I'm wrong. You cannot at this stage claim for loss of fish. Don't ever believe that. I would like to see that in this claim. This is negotiations when it gets down to the table. Sue the hell out of those guys for a loss of fish. Just because they fund us, we can't have that in the proxy model. I don't believe that. I'm sorry, but I'm old-fashioned. Our people lost more than one little island. They took our livelihood. Same thing, Chief, with Philip Edward Island. We have made studies now, the Sedgwick and Killarney people, of how we used that island. Let's make a full case here. Thank you. Here, Chief.
Maybe just to help in some of this discussion. And I just want to say that I'm not here to defend the specific claims process. It's a process that I was directed to engage in, and so I'm just trying to deal with it. Of course, there's other approaches which I'll talk about later that are available, but in any case, under this specific claims process, there's rules set out that restrict, and I know we have problems with them. We should discuss that more. But the thing is, in terms of this proxy model, it's a model, a method for calculating loss of use that has only recently been brought about. Specific Claims has found, they've settled a number of claims using it. Our initial assessment of it, it may be advantageous to us, but we need to do more technical analysis of that to ensure, because what the proxy model does is, under the old process, as Chief Henry Pelche mentioned yesterday, under the old method, to appraise and examine every piece of land, and then, okay, oh yeah, and then the negotiations would come down to arguing about whether the claimant would have used those lands for that purpose. Now, under the proxy model, what's done is a rent value is established for each piece of land, and it's supposed to be based on the highest and best value. And then a calculation is applied to it that incorporates inflation and rising land values, and then a projection is made between two dates, a beginning date and an end date. Now, what's holding up our appraisal work is agreeing on the beginning date. Now, again, what the government was saying to us is, well, because we're using this model, we're not assessing each piece of land and arguing about what we would have used it for potentially, because that's usually what lengthened most negotiations, was that whole argument about, oh no, you wouldn't have used it for forestry, or no, you know, and it was prolonged arguments that are almost unresolvable in many cases. But in any case, I'm not trying to defend the proxy model either, but I'm just trying to say, under this model, when you apply this formula, then you're completing this task in less than a year, what usually takes years. But what the government was saying to us, Canada, was that because no lands were sold until, as we've indicated, 1881, and Fitzwilliam was sold some few years after that, that we had use of these islands. So therefore, we should find a median date, a date somewhere in there that would provide this. It's sort of a thumbnail determination. Okay, well, this would. But as our financial advisor, Bernie Friedland, had briefed us back in October, this date of 1862, as opposed to what was proposed 1895, in terms of quantum cash value of the compensation, it's 2/3 larger using 1862 under the model as opposed to using 1895. So that's fairly significant. So this council resolved that we want to move that date up, and part of that strategy was that, well, 1862 should be justified because we're pointing out that there were alienations prior to 1862, and these leases that were being done in the 1850s are clear evidence of that. So it's up to us how much evidence we want to argue with. I mean, one lease was good enough to show them, look, lands were alienated, but we've done a little more. It's up to us to decide how much we want to table. Then we need to require them to make the decision. Okay, do you accept this? Is it good enough? Ontario has already indicated to us they're happy with 1862 to use under the proxy model. Always keeping in mind it's under this proxy model. It's not compensation, as I said, under the old style of assessing each piece of land and then arguing about it. I mean, maybe that's what we need to do, I think. Because the proxy model is so new, Professor Carr is one of the developers of this model from the University of Toronto. The chair of the economics department at the University of Toronto, I think it's Victor Hasios, was called as an expert witness in the Whitefish Lake claim, and he also developed this model for First Nations independently of Professor Carr. So two economists developed an exact same similar model independently of each other. So in that sense, I guess that provides arguments for perhaps it is a fair model, but there could be arguments against it, which one of them being a lack of understanding of what it is. The other being it may not be fair to us. So I think we have to do more work on that. And I'm just trying to help clarify this issue with the proxy model and the calculating of this loss of use compensation under it. And just one other point that was brought up in terms of the Toma-Kanoshamig sketch at the table. It was the federal government that brought it up when we said when we proposed that we wanted Philip Edward Island, and those islands, actually off the record, Ontario encouraged us to include all the islands up to the French River Provincial Park, which includes all the islands in Beaverstone Bay. And there, Ontario was happy with that for their own reasons. And I won't get into that right now, but the thing is, when we presented that, saying these are the lands that are unceded, these are the lands we've always used, and these should have been part of the unceded reserve, even though we didn't agree with that treaty. They said, well, we have the testimony of, or not testimony, we have this quote of this Chief Toma Kanoshamek, but they had applied their own interpretation to that council meeting in 1895, I think it was. And Toma Kanoshamek himself wasn't saying that this is accurate. In fact, he pointed out, he didn't draw the sketch. It was the fisheries officer that drew the sketch. And then the sketch we have is not even the original sketch. It says that right in the record, that the sketch, Toma Kanoshamek looked at it, and he wasn't saying this is our reserve, he was saying this is our fishery, Wikwemikoong's fishery. And then he said, that is not it. When that fisheries officer that was present at the meeting produced this redraw of the sketch because they couldn't find the original, Toma Kanoshamek says right there in the record, this is not accurate, but for the purposes of this discussion, that's what we argued, I'll take it, he said. So, fortunately, through our forestry unit, we had submitted a map in 1996, and when Henry had done a letter, we had done a letter in response to one of the rejections, we had included a map with that letter that included Philip. Well, it's not clear whether it included Philip Edward Island, but at least it goes east of there, and then the line comes down. That saved us at the negotiation table here, because when Canada said they wouldn't accept Philip Edward Island, but they said because this was in the sketch that you submitted with your claim submissions, we'll accept George Island. So they had agreed then to include George Island in the negotiations. So I'm just telling you what's happening in the process, and I'm not trying to defend the specific claims process, because if anything, I tried to change that process as, on behalf of First Nations across Canada for 12 years, and we were unsuccessful. And recent legislation, which I still need to brief you on, has made the situation even worse, in my view, because now we have this policy that we've so long been opposed to, although we're forced to use it. It is now enshrined in legislation. But in any case, I'm sorry to take so long, but I was just trying to provide some clarification around this, so we center our discussion on what's going to help us.
Thank you, Roy. To Stephen and to our chiefs that we have here today, is early in October, that was the first time I ever participated in a negotiations meeting that took place in Toronto. And if anything, the date, this 1895, which is my understanding, just kind of came up however which way it did, but there was some belief that it was some kind of scientific date that was identified, how it was identified. So anyway, then we came back and we reported to council, and then that's when we were advised that 1862 is what the focus should be. So at that point then is in October and again the next time we met was that they give us that we were going to take the opportunity as far as the next negotiation being in Wikwemikoong to justify our perspective of what the history is in defending 1862. So knowing that when it comes to the impacts of the Treaty of 1836, that yesterday we had a translation in our own language of the 1836, and it's been advised by our veteran chiefs that and Hardy as instrumental in the past land claim, that when it's translated, that we would have never signed to what it means today, and trying to translate it to the best way we can to do our interpretation of it. and most important, there are words in there that have been indicated by Chief Ron Wakagiji that could not be translated. So knowing that here we are, 1862, and it was Chief Henry at that meeting in November in Wikwemikoong, where we did our best to say, okay, well, 1862, but Chief Henry said, we'll go as far back as 1836 if we have to compromise to an 1862. So I think maybe, if anything, then is knowing that here are our facts, here's our perspective. When we look at when we hear our oral history, and whatever, again, what the significant reports that have been shared and researched, and the actual, again, treaty documents to our interpretation of what they are, then we almost need a I don't know, an advisory committee to again strategize what it is going to be when it comes to going back to the table and firming up a date, and this is why. So what else I want to say here? So anyway, I hope then from leaving this table today that we are going to get the clear direction that when it comes to setting this pathway for future generations, that there is we're clear on what the next the approaches or the things we have to do, not only when it comes to the specific land claim that we're working on now, but again, it's pathway when it comes to Manitoulin Island and the 23,000 islands. But I think it's critical again that we talk more about this. We talk more about the 1862 and really what that dramatic change was for us to defend the start date at 1862, and knowing that from 1895 to 1862, that's a total of 33 years. And then one question that I do have is, at the end of the day, we come to determine through the proxy model that here's the loss and the value of what are the extraction of resources, the loss of use to the land and the resources, our livelihood when it comes to fishing. That at the end of the day, the governments may say, well, this is all we have to offer you. But the thing that's critical again is that our band membership of Wikwemikoong truly understand and know what the true losses are as far as we're concerned. So I think it's very important that again that we thoroughly understand what this loss of use is, and because I don't think we're going to have too much control as far as what they're going to hand over to us when it comes to fairness. But I think in order to empower our people in moving forward in future generations, then this loss of use is very significant as far as going through this process. And then one of the things that has been raised as far as kind of expediting the process where we're calculating the loss of use, that should we even be talking about comparing even one island, and Badgley Island has been one of the islands that has been suggested, where let's actually review what the revenues that have been generated when it comes to that particular island, just so that, again, we have substantial and that when it comes to what's being extracted there, that loss or that the potential that we had way back when that we're struggling with today. And when we started the session, we talked about economic development and how that's kind of impeding on us now, when it was vice versa when the governments were saying that we were impeding on civilization. But at this point where we're at, then we might call them as stalling tactics or whatever it might be, but I think the more we get a handle on this, the more assertive and aggressive we can be. And then when it comes to the end of the day, where we're in this negotiations process, and We're still trying to agree amongst the three parties what's fair, and then to what point do we determine that it's not fair and we go the other route. But I think if anything, I believe that if we put all the right cards on the table and the approaches, we truly understand this history, then we will be successful and we wouldn't have to go into the court system. But knowing that the communications that's going to be coming out as far as informing the general public, and in Ontario again, what has the ultimate obligation to ensure what the information that is going to be circulated. But we, as the community of Wikwemikoong, we want to make sure that this mainstream gets a better sense of what our losses are and really what we had to suffer and what our tragedy was from you know, where we didn't participate in the 1862, and as far as what the 1836 was all about, that, you know, there's an obligation to protect what our inherent rights are. So there's so much to reflect on as we move forward, and it for sure is not going to take overnight, because even this last 6 months that I have been in office, truly, I'm getting a sense of or I feel a sense of obligation to the rest of the community out there, that you have every right to know this information to empower yourselves, empower ourselves as a community. But anyway, that's kind of what I have to share at this point, and I'll give the microphone back to Hardy then.
You're absolutely right. In the development of the 1836 treaty, Bondhead says to its superiors, these native people are impeding the progress of civilization. Do you know something? This is what they're doing to us right now. They're holding us back on making our lives better. Chief, I just want one thing I'd like to add on. During the process of our negotiations, I think it's open, and I think it should be really talked about, is the a facilitator. Here we are sitting at the table with three levels of government: First Nations, Ontario, and Canada. And throughout my experience in sitting at the negotiator, we had a facilitator. There's a Claims Commission of Ontario in Toronto. They documented everything. They made sure that everything was running accordingly. And I think we have that option to do that. Ontario has agreed to have a facilitator, a third party sitting there. And I thought to myself, maybe a judge. You know, to sit in there. And I think, Steve, you want to touch on that, what your views would be?
Friends, when you have three, I'm going to show it to you this way. This is, I've been a lawyer 22 years. I've learned a few things, but I've learned there's many things I don't know. And I've been a judge 10 years, so there's been lots of disputes. But you see, if this is Wikwemikoong negotiating here, and you know Canada's always got more people, so here's Canada here. Mr. Julik's acting for Canada now. You guys are... Right about here's Canada. This is how it goes. I've been there, I've seen it. Ray, you pick where you want to go. Start Cecilia over here. Ontario. Now I'm getting a little old. When I was young, I was yapping all the time. I'm slowing up, you know. Not 60 yet. The lawyers are yapping at each other all the time. That's the first problem we get. And then the negotiators start yapping. And then all the experts are yapping at one another. This is true. And then everybody's yapping. So what you need to do is, when we had our negotiations, we had David Mackey from the ICO here in the middle, keeping the peace. So facilitate, keeps the peace, pushes them back a little bit, pushes them back a little bit. I think you should have a facilitator or a person in the middle. And for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 reasons. You can control the process. The facilitator can keep people under control, including from time to time Wikwemikoong. That's fair is fair, right? Maybe less so for Wiki, but fair is fair. You got to push the governments. Wikwemikoong will push. Ontario will push Wiki. Canada will push Ontario, but a facilitator can push as well. This is a pretty big problem you're working on. I think and there's no ICO now. It hasn't been sitting for some time. But I'll make an off-the-record suggestion. If you find that you're getting into negotiations, I think you'll move forward faster with a facilitator or a person, and that person has to be someone that all 3 governments agree to work with. Wiki can't say it must be this person if Ontario and Canada doesn't agree. No, and Canada and Ontario say that. You will be more successful. We even find now as judges, when we have lots of disputes, we get in the middle of these things and we have ways of pushing parties and meeting with them and trying to facilitate. So I think it's a good idea, Hardy. Whether they'd ever agree that I could do it, you can check and see. Remember, I was your lawyer at one time, but truly, my friends, if the opportunity came up and Ontario and Canada agreed, you must know that what we're all committed to doing is to trying to achieve a settlement that all 3 parties would agree on. There's no such thing as a settlement if only Wikwemikoong likes it, or if only Canada likes it, or Ontario likes it. So that's the role of a facilitator. The parties are working on something that they can get to together. And I'll just close on this. Facilitators are on the phone. They're pushing people for meetings. They're setting up meetings. They're pushing all the time. So I think the government should, this should be addressed with the governments if you're going to get into this process here. Thank you.
Go ahead, Stephen. I think if anything, knowing that although the negotiation, the meetings for the negotiations have been stalled to some extent, but I was looking at it today as a blessing in disguise where we're having an opportunity like this to kind of get both feet on the ground and clear direction and understanding on next steps. So at this point, it's my understanding that there has been somebody identified within the federal government to be sanctioned as their negotiator. And then I would only hope that come beginning of April, early April, that we go back to the table again. But beforehand, before that April comes about, that we would issue a letter or suggesting, providing this recommendation as far as one discussion item when we go back to the table. So maybe if everybody agrees to that, especially band council, then we'll start working on that letter first thing next week then. And maybe at this point, well, we're at 11:30. Does anybody that would like to have be given the opportunity at this point for any other questions?
This is my own personal feelings, my own personal way of thinking. The more I hear the processes, the more I believe a court system is not such a bad idea. There is a very, very bad word within the specific claims, is surrender. And I've heard it a couple of days ago that they may find a new word. I kind of doubt that. Anything that we do, at the end of the day, there's a word surrender, which is a bad word for us here, Wikwemikoong Unceded First Nation. When we go to the courthouse, the facilitator is sitting here, and everybody agrees to a settlement arrangement. And then we walk back to the courthouse, and we tell the judge, Thank you for the proposed order. We managed to sit down peacefully. We got an agreement here. Here it is. Here's what we agreed on. The court is not going to ask you for surrender. Keep that in mind. They're not going to ask for surrender. That's what's happening here. I want to reiterate the points that I'm learning the last couple of days. This is very good.
Okay, from what I can gather from sitting in the office, that our negotiation team has been again rolling as a lead in the negotiations. Chief Henry and to some extent Chief Eugene and Councillor Duke Pelche and that's it, and legal counsel. We go back to the table. That I think, if anything, that when we look at the delegates that sit around that table, then yes, we're always outnumbered for sure. And what we need to identify even today is here's our negotiation team, and here's how we're going to voice again fairness in the deliberations as far as what we're negotiating. Or even if we meet with Ontario prior to where we're at today, then knowing that there's significant travel involved, but I honestly believe that Ontario and Canada are willing to, if anything, have majority of the meetings happen right here in Wikwemikoong, where in considering the requirements of travel time and health and et cetera, that when we go back to the table, that we request again that all our veteran chiefs are very much a part of this process, and they are part of our negotiations team. So we can include that in the letter also. But as far as adding to the team, then your guidance would be appreciated there, even if there's when it comes to suggestions from our chiefs that are here today. And then I think even that will, as we continue in this process, then we'll only be strong and be able. The success of this land claim that we're in now is as simple as getting clear direction and guidance from our veteran chiefs, and especially when it comes to more experienced people that have been already successful in claiming land that's rightfully ours. So I would again strongly encourage that Hardy Pelche be a part of the negotiations team when we're sitting at the table with Canada and Ontario. So at this point, that's one thing I'm hoping, and I'll start putting on writing a list of our negotiation team, and if we feel we need to add anyone else, then we'll do that today. Councillor Moore.
Miigwech Chief Counsel and our guest Stephen O'Neill and our respective chiefs. I just wanted to know if, as part of our claim, can we put actual stories from individuals? Like I'm 48 and I remember the Anso Kewin that our grandparents and our aunties would talk about was the livelihood when they were young. And I remember listening to my grandfather going to Collins Inlet and Beaverstone, and he would go and cook over there. And even when he was young, he talked about seeing the Virgin Mary and talking about that when he was young. And also listening to seeing, when we were kids, seeing Liam Glesh going out fishing and taking his boat out early in the morning, and also the Pangwishes and Shimnakut would go out also. So those are the people those are the families we should be contacting about the stories that are being told. And this was the time when we used to tell the stories between the harsh winter and to the spring. And I remember those stories at a very young age. And I also remember the stories from Adam Corbier talking about Horse Island, which is Fitzwilliam Island. He talked about Bejbojim Nisensing, and he talked about how the horses fell through the ice, and also the barge that was set up in Mantoning. And I remember my grandfather used to cook there. And I also remember the stories that my husband Randy talks about with his grandfather when they used to go trapping on some of the islands, and they would go fish out there and set up net fishing. So those are stories we have to talk about and bring forward, because our elders are starting to go to the spirit world, and I'm trying to recollect how old my grandfather was. So he must have been born in the 1900s. So I imagine his stories that he has from his parents are probably, some of the ones that have passed on are taken to the gravesite. So I think we should really concentrate on some of the stories that are out there. And I remember also my grandfather, Angus Triddle, would paint about his livelihood, and his paintings show a lot of that livelihood in Beaverstone. And he talks about the boats that were here in the Great Lakes. So those are really actual stories that portray a lot of our livelihood here on the island. And also when you look at that 1836 at Chippewas, I remember my grandfather and my dad talked about going to Cape Croker and visiting their relatives in the McLeods, and going out there. And I was saying, how did they get out there? And then Randy indicated that because we have a cottage on Lake Huron, and he said there's different islands that they would boat from, and they would spend nights there. And that's how they got to Cape Croker, is through the Lake Huron. So I'm wondering if some of those stories could be presented in our actual claims, because I think there are stories from the Flamas, the Triddles, the Reckleys, the Pongwishes, a lot of from our own reserve here. If I can recollect as a young girl the stories, I'm sure there's other people that can recollect stories when they were being told by our grandfathers and grandmothers.
Has recommended again that we initiate Wikwemikoong Historical Society, and then here's a group of people. When it comes to our resource technicians, is we need to help them develop an action plan or work plan to again address all these other issues. But knowing that there are elder interviews that have been documented or through video or through transcription. But at the same time, I start visiting people today too that even we're as young as as young as 45 years old, or I don't know how old we're. Like to me, I try to remember whatever I can, but I only remember. I don't know that history, but just what I'm being introduced to, it's just amazing. So if anything, then that one of the things that is gonna what's gonna come out of here then is that we establish Historical Society for Wikwemikoong, and what we can do as far as bringing the history in the schools or to wherever, how realistically we can do this. And when it comes to other partnerships with other communities like Killarney, then that will be part of the work plan too. So, but for sure, when it comes to gathering information, as far as oral history goes, to lend support to the land claim, then Henry Piroanquit is very much a part of that. And so you.
Well, I'd like to just let everyone know that I started with historical research back in 2002. I was asked to do an archaeological survey along with Pat Julik here for the Point Rundine Reserve, so we can find out as much history as we can. And at that time, I did start doing some elder interviews. And it was fortunate that we got to work with Smuggler. Smuggler was one of our lead guides when we worked there. So I've got a lot of information from Smuggler in regards to Point Rondine and the area itself. And I have been stressing the fact for a long time that we need to interview these elders with a video recorder, and maybe even go further and bring these elders with us to these locations, like for instance, Philip Edward Island. Not just a simple interview where they say stuff. Take them there, get them to show us the spots. We did get a chance, Lizim Replay, before he passed away, he joined us on that Chibatagonsing Imagine that was there with us, and we did a bit of surveying there, but we couldn't get into the area identified there now as the burial mound, but I'd like to go back there again and revisit that site. But we did visit, we did do a little bit of surveying on and around there because it was too shallow there at the time, but I guess we could try and make it around there using by foot and going around the waters there, I guess. But like I said, we need to do these interviews with the remaining elders. So unfortunately, we've lost a lot of good resources. They've been deceased now, and it's not long ago. It's within the last 5 years we've lost a lot, and I feel really bad about that. And the next thing is, my goal within this next 4 months is I'm just going to try see how it comes out, see how effective it's going to be. I'm going to try and put some materials, the treaties and petitions and whatnot, onto a database that's going to be readily available through the internet via public library and wiki with the use of library cards, as far as I understand right now. That's what I'm going to be working on. I'm going to try and get this done within the next few months, and then I'm going to visit Dominic Botry to see if he can get some of the teachers with maybe the grade 11 or grade 12 students to do a history project on treaties and get their interpretation on it, and they'll have this readily available on the internet by the time I have it in there. And then I want to do this just as a tryout base, trial run. I want to see how effective it is going to be. So if we do that and if we follow up on it, by the end of the school term, we could see at least how effective these students had used that through the internet of what I provided. So there's a lot of work to be done yet, and I'm really happy to be involved in this historical research with the island claims again. And I've learned a lot. I've done a lot of historical research myself. I've done a lot of archives in Ottawa. The paper that was just passed around, I brought that from Ottawa on one of our trips, mini trips with Pat to Ottawa. And but a lot of this was, I knew it, but it was just, I'm just relearning it again. Like I read the New Beginning report again, and the Smith report, the Shanahan report, and my God, I forgot a lot about this. And it brought back a lot of memories, and this is what's happening to us. We're forgetting about our history. And we need to bring that back to our people. And once we do that, I think we're going to get a long ways to especially getting at our future generations. Anyway, that's all I'll share for now. And did you want to make a comment on anything like that? Yeah, Pat and I do have a report of our survey of Point Rondine. And also, I do have a report on the survey we've done around Collins Inlet, Chickanishing, and all those little sites there. We even done a few parts on the Killarney Provincial Park with the permission of Chuck Miller, superintendent over there at the park. So there is a lot of history of our people in those areas, and we do have a report on it. And anybody's welcome to. Maybe I can make if somebody wants a copy, I can easily obtain 2 copies.
So maybe the copy should go.
Yeah.
We'll try and get some duplicates of these copies of these reports, and there's summaries of the elder interviews that Henry did in here. Some of these people actually grew up at Point Grandin, and they were forced out of there in the 1930s. They had to move back over here. But anyway, yeah, there's been quite a bit done. It's just that it hasn't been very well distributed around or disseminated, I think. Pretty much.
Just to, when I first experienced that negotiations team, there's like subcommittees. There's a lands technical group, an appraisal group, and a communications group, and what's the other one? Just those three. I think if anything, when we identify who our negotiation team is going to be, and to make it, again, our voice stronger, we need to identify our own work groups in three of those areas. And the Wikwemikoong Historical Society area too, where we're actually giving, with the heritage organization that exists today, is reaching out to that program to say, you know, we need to work more on a collective effort here as far as what's been discussed here too. So,
I traveled with Emmerich Chigwaja and Jingwa and a lot of my trips to the territory we're talking about. We were traveling just on this side of the quarry. There's a high mountain there. Emmerich says, you know who was born here? I said, it's not Columbus. He says, this is where Jidan was born. So I know Jidan's birthplace. It's just on this side of the quarry. In September, they were going to work. Her mother labored, this is where she was born. So that's about some of the history that, you know, and that's very keen. That tells me one thing. We were still using that territory recently. Jidan is a little bit younger than me, but you know, this is today's history too. It's amazing, you know, what you find out when you go out there with the old fellas. Oh, by the way, Chief, how old do you have to be an elder anyway? I've always wanted to be one.
Chief is talking about the Treaty of 1836 and the Niagara Treaty. So that's going to come to you, and then for sure, like I was sharing with Ronnie here, there's so much information. I keep asking Henry for sure when he comes forward, can I have a copy of that? Can I have a copy of that? Because it's so critical that we not only visit what our primary source of validation, but again, it's important to read these other this other reference material to again to be solid and firm about our assertion and what the approach is going to be, and as we continue with this specific land claim. So before we do a round table, then, as far as what I've heard, is that when it comes to future direction in the specific land claim, there's some clear direction, but at the same time, there's other things that we need to do as a community when we look at the overall historical perspective and empowering our people with our own sense of what our identity, our history is rather. So as far as specific land claim is that we'd go back to we used 1836 as a start date, and then we compromised with the two other parties for 1862. So we're gonna, that's the approach, I guess, as far as when we meet at the next negotiations table. And then as far as negotiations team for Wikwemikoong, again, we have Roland Tonglish as our lead negotiator, and we have our legal advisor as Marty Bear as resource. But in this team today, that if anything, we'll have, again, with their acceptance, and I know they will, where they're obviously here to support this initiative and guide this initiative. We'll have Chief Ronald Walkagijik, Chief Henry Pelche, Chief Eugene Manitowoc, Hardy Albert Pelche, myself. Just recently, again, within this new term, that we've extended the support or assistance from Band Councillor Cecilia Pitawanakwit as she's the LRC portfolio, Band Councillor Duke Pelche as he's the education portfolio, and we'll implement a representative from the Youth Council that we're hoping to have established within the next couple of weeks. And then, so if everybody's in agreement with that, and Henry and Ronnie and Hardy, that you continue to assist us again on the negotiations team. And we'll put it in writing if... Okay, so everybody's in agreement with that then? Especially Band Council, okay? Okay, and then as far as the subcommittees, work groups that have been identified in at the negotiations table, there's a technical land work group, an appraisal work group, and a communications work group. The technical land group, work group rather, as far as on our part, like when the three parties come together, they have again designates in these committees. But in order for us to be proactive and get our information together the best way we can, as far as being aggressive and assertive in our position, then the technical land group consists of our lands director and her team, and that's all the lands and resources staff that we had here today. Our technical services manager, who is Bill Sinaway. And then as far as the environmental, we're hoping that Daniel Wasangiso will be a part of that specific work group. And then we have, again, our own subcommittees at the local level, where when the negotiations team meets as an advisory, then we're that far ahead in the game as far as our own resources go and technical support. And then the appraisal committee, as far as I know, the appraisal committee or the team that we have only consists now of our auditor, Freeland Caldwell and Riley. So it's been suggested that in our own appraisal team is that not only we access the support from our auditor, but it's recommended that Band Councillor Walter Manitowoc sit on the appraisal team, and Mary Lynn Ojic from the Economic Development and Ottawa-Gedic Development Commission. And again, as we move forward, if there's any other suggestions on any of these teams, then that would be appreciated. Then as far as communications work group or team is certainly the Heritage Organization Program Manager, and Wiki TV5 as our communications media expertise in our community. I certainly like to sit on that communications subgroup too, but so that's open, like again, when it comes to gathering information, compiling information, what goes in there, then we're certainly going to get direction from this new group called the Wikwemikoong Historical Society. So the Historical Society, who is going to spearhead this, is Henry Pitawanakwit, from what he's established already in his work plan, the Heritage Organization, and whoever delegates from the education system. So those are subcommittees, work groups that are going to, again, assist in this overall process where there's more community involvement and direction, and that we're all kind of learning together in a more efficient way. And then as far as the negotiations table, we will be writing all the other two parties and requesting that there be consideration of a facilitator mediator. So as a facilitator mediator in this process, I honestly believe the little bit I've experienced at the negotiation table, that idea is really good, because we're kind of all scattered, and when the notes come out that nobody signs the minutes because they're saying, well, we can't say we said that for sure, we meant that, it kind of slows down the process really. But if we have a facilitator that's, I believe, is going to be objective, but in all fairness, he's familiar with the responsibilities and expectations from each of those, everybody at the table. So when we write the letter, we're going to recommend, at this point, Stephen O'Neill. Not our honor Stephen O'Neill, but Stephen O'Neill. And then when these when these negotiations take place again, we're also going to include in the letter that we want consistent commitment by each of the other parties. Or no more changeovers. If anything, there needs to be that firm commitment as far as resolution to this process. And then, if anything, that we will be asking in respect to our members of our negotiation team, that majority of the discussions are happening here in Wikwemikoong. Councilor Maureen? Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilor Maureen. So we will be extending invitation to Chief Gladys and Chief Wally to also assist on the negotiations team. Councilor Mary Jo? And Chief Robert Corbier, right. Or I'll be an L. Okay, very good. And then, so as far as the negotiation, the location negotiations meeting, we will ask that it's a majority over here. And then, in the discussions when it comes to having the utmost consideration when we look at the legacies that has been left behind for us to take forward, then that we have a summer ceremony this year to acknowledge or honor our spiritual ancestors to where we're at today, to get that spiritual guidance also. So we're gonna, if anything, rely on the Historical Society or the team there to help advise on where, when, and how to do that. So that's kind of what I've been able to sum up then as far as the discussions here. And then at this point, we'll go around the table, and then we'll start with Hardy.
Which, Chief, that's a very good suggestion, Maureen, because, you know, of the many years that I've been involved in there, I wish I had more people with me. All I had was Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Williams. I used to kick that one or this one. Don't say that. Or the other side, eh? But it's not the idea. I'm going to kick the former chiefs. I'm just going to list about 5 areas, expand on them a long ways. Former, this thing don't like me. Chief Wally suggested an advisory group. Is that the same meeting team, Chief? Okay. I think if we're going to make a statement and show what we really believe in, I still have a problem of allowing NIMI claiming our islands. It states NIMI and surrounding islands. They took some of our islands. They're under NIMI, Northeast Manitoulin Island. They're still there. You know, we are neglecting to protect those islands. So sometimes we go this way, or do we go this way? We're trying to get our islands back, and at the same time we should be getting our islands back under NIMI. Or at least charge them taxes for it or something, like they're doing to us. The other portion that should be discussed. As we proceed into negotiations, somebody told me a long time ago, a former chief, we're going to be taxed. I don't know what's happening since then. Around by the WHO building, we are being taxed by the little current. We should get rid of that, make our statement known. In order for us to support of what we're trying to do, let's get away from that tax area. Perhaps, Chief and delegates, I would like to, somewhere down the road, maybe from our legal counsel, to set out negotiations versus court, the pros and cons of it, just in case it comes up, we won't be scrambling. Let's take a look at what the courts have to offer, or negotiations, and also, with counselors, within a month, let's put a timetable here and have a meeting with the band membership. I'm not comfortable today. We're going something here that maybe most of our band members don't know. And I would like to suggest, Chief, within a month, get some sort of a direction from our people. We used to do that. We carried around a DVD. Is that what you call those things? And we made one, Danny Manitobi and myself, and we shared that with each community. It was done on camera, and this is what we were supposed to be doing within the last month. I hope, with the help we got here for the last couple of days, that we can take excerpts of it, for the people, for our people. And one thing that was brought on this morning is the education system. We now have a chance to get this into the education system. We have fought for the Anishinaabe to look after our education system. I had a very good partner, God bless his soul, who worked hard on that. We have native teachers. God darn it, I hate to say this, they come and go for every 2 weeks. I think it's time to get them to work what we are working for, the education part, to our people and to our, most importantly, our young kids. Chief has mentioned many times, last month or so, some kid come and ask her, what can we do, how do you protect our interests? See, that's the issue. We have no answers for them, We are studying this now, even at our age here, Ronnie, Henry, and I, we're learning every day that we should be sharing to our educational system. These guys did a lot of work, and I didn't know that because just only last week, Henry comes up with a report of what they did in Grandin. Holy Toledo, we are so strong historically. When you talk about, Chief, summer ceremony, I've got a story which I will share with you at the right moment about Wikwemikoong up on the, just past Killarney, the burial grounds. I have a very important message for you after, but I got a few things I want to hear some more. We did Grandin, we forgot all about it. If I went around here and asked them, do you know where the boundary line is in Mill Lake? I don't know if anybody can tell me. I would propose, Chief and Council, to go do a ceremony at Wikwemikoong and Chicknishing, and also the boundary where I indicated The first survey bar should be on the western southerly portion, just on this side of Masanancing River. Bill Pitfield's company there. And I think we should go over there and give thanks to our grandfathers for helping us gain that territory. I have another story on that too eventually. I'm very, very committed in my mind before I leave this world. We gotta do this. We have to do it. I can only say one thing. The spirits are waiting. Believe me. Miigwech.
Honey, Miigwech, with what you shared with us makes a lot of sense. I'd like to attest to the fact that we have a lot of historical information regarding our properties. And there is one thing I'd like to share with you. There's a lot of spiritual stuff over there in Point Grandin. I was we split up into groups when we were there. I went out on my own. Well, Carol came with me, but Pat went out on his own. There was only 3 of us. And I was carrying a shovel. And I was walking along using that shovel as sort of like a cane, sort of. And all of a sudden I hit this spot and my shovel started shaking on me. And I kind of wondered, I thought maybe there was a rattlesnake there or something. I kind of panicked at first. And then I ignored it and kept on walking. And it happened again the second time. And then I told Carol, something's here. Let's survey this area. So we done some test pits. Sure enough, there was a building there right at that spot. I found the corners of the buildings, and then where that spot where the shovel shook, there was a shoe underneath there. It was really amazing, and I carried that for a long time. And even when we cleared the burial mounds and the big burial site over there on Beaverstone River, it was amazing. The feeling, the overwhelming feeling I had is as if those people were saying, thank you, you found us, stuff like that. So I went a little bit further and I got Stephen to make a big cross. And I erected a big 10-foot cross over there on that Beaverstone burial site with the names, with a plaque on there with the names of everybody that was laying there. So we done a lot of work over there. And again, I know where Hardy's coming from when he said, I bet you couldn't show me where the boundaries were. And I'm very proud to say I was fortunate enough to walk those boundaries. So I walked the whole of Point Grandin practically. So, it's really amazing, and we need to share that with our community. We need more trips, maybe with chief and council, to go there and see for themselves. I took the whole committee there one time. I showed them the burial site on Beaverstone River, and we showed them the old village there. Just a little bit, just to get a little bit of a taste of what we've seen there, right? And there's a lot, as far as this 2-day workshop went, I think we went a long ways as far as intent is concerned, because I had no sense of direction regarding my title before we came to this workshop. But now I'm very eager to get back to work on Monday and get started I came up with a lot of ideas as to which direction I'm going to go, as far as bringing this, implementing this into the education system. I have a lot of ideas that I've gathered that from hearing remarks or comments from you guys. And it's really great to have been here with everyone, and I was really overwhelmed at the way Stephen O'Neill, feels about us, like how welcome he feels with us, and what he shared with us. It really clarified a lot of things for me from his perspective. Eh? So it's been a really good workshop, and I really enjoyed it. And thanks to everyone that's been present here. Miigwech, and I'll pass it on to the next one.
Honey, I want to touch on Point Grandin. As Henry was saying, we spend a lot of time over there, and a lot of the work that we did over there, we learned a lot, especially what really
what really touched me was Chicknishing, concerning the boundary lines there. When Keating and they went and surveyed that property, went and surveyed the reserve, and they made it actually smaller than what it was. And I can't imagine how they could possibly bypass the chief's home, which was situated right at the mouth of the Chicknishing River. He had a beautiful log home there, and he with cultivated gardens, and I don't know how in the world that they could possibly bypass that and make that reserve smaller than it was. The reports from INAC that they had, when they were talking about the homes at Beaverstone, Chicknishing, they even indicated in their reports that the homes of the Beaverstone people were by far superior to many of the Shawanosh homes within the area. I thought that was really important because that was a thriving community. The people at Point Grande, Chicknishing, Beaverstone area, they worked very hard to maintain their homes and their properties. And I'm really happy that Chief and Council and the community worked really hard all these years to get that Point Grande property back to the reserve and to its boundaries that we now have. I also wanted to touch on what Hardy had mentioned yesterday pertaining to with the island claims going on now and with the other roadblock that's thrown up to our faces where Roland indicated that INAC, or they would have to train another negotiator. And I fully agree with Hardy in saying, you know, like that's another tactic, they're stalling, let's just move on. And something else that I'm really was surprised at was that I think Roland had mentioned that they had withdrew Fitzwilliam Island off the negotiating table. Is that right, Roland?
No, they were proposed, Ontario, one part of the negotiations was proposing to purchase Fitzwilliam and put it on the table.
But it's back on the table.
Well, that's what we're going to meet with in the next meeting.
Okay, because I thought you had mentioned yesterday that the person that is, well, owning Fitzwilliam Island, if I didn't hear you correctly, I thought you had said that he had said that there was no way in hell that Wikwemikoong was going to get that island.
They told people that at one point. I don't think we should make that assumption.
Because that, you know, I mean, the person that owns that island now, did they say that? Yes, Hardy.
I made that remark, and it wasn't an assumption. That man came over to us in Wickby when Walter was chief. He came and put us real down. He said, as long as my name is alive, you guys, you need this. Well, this is true. Will not live on that island or touch it. And he said, and I told him, sir, Garden, whatever his name is, I haven't lost him. He says, you'll never live very, the chief. So, somebody mentioned through these negotiations, I wasn't part of it, Roman was, he mentioned that someone, I don't know if it's from the province, indicated that they would buy it. Is that what happened? Essentially, yes, essentially.
Wow.
But, no.
Go ahead.
But we haven't pursued that.
if somebody says something, go for it. Then he said, well, maybe it's off the table, but to me it's not. There's always a way of getting things around.
Yeah, okay, because I had thought, you know, if that person had said that, I had, you know, when I heard that, I thought, well, that sounds like a challenge to me, and I don't think Fitzwilliam Island should be withdrawn from the table. I think it should stay on the table because our ancestors and our chief and council down the line and our chief and council today are fighting so hard for those islands, and you know, there are islands that belong to us, and that includes Fitzwilliam Island and Manitoulin Island. One other thing that I wanted to mention was with the, I'm very happy and I think it's really nice that one of the islands is being called the Ojig Island. I think that's that there are islands and that they belong to us and we should be able to rename them. And I think with the remainder islands that are on our, that belong to us, I feel in my heart that those islands should be called after the names of the gentleman, the chief that signed the 1836 treaty, and those islands, they should have their names on those islands so that nobody in Wikwemikoong would ever forget that they fought so hard to get those islands. I also think that with the chief and council today, all the chief and council that were involved, the chiefs, I think those islands should be named after them, which would be included the Wakagijag, Washkish, Wakagijag.
Carol, if anything, they can invite you to sit down with the Historical Society and we'll get to that.
Okay.
As far as that, there's a lot of details for sure.
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, but that's what I think anyway with pertaining to the islands. What I learned a lot here yesterday. It was very, very good. I enjoyed listening to the elders talking, especially about our history. I really enjoyed that, and I'm really glad to be a part of it and to be here. Miguel.
Hello, my name is Ken Jocko, and I'd like to say hello to everybody. And I really appreciate that we're having this workshop, and I'm really proud of our former chiefs, Ron Wakijik, Henry Pelchi, and Eugene Talia, and Hardy Pelchi for all the work they have done to keep this alive, and I really appreciate from my heart what they have done. I'm really proud of them. And one thing too that's really caught my eye a lot here when we're having these sessions is information, knowing each other where we sit and what we represent. Like Henry Pichwanko there, he's doing the history of all the stuff of all the elders and all that. I never knew that. And that's really good to hear that you're doing that. I'm really happy that's happening. A lot of times I've been thinking myself, even before, like I really respect our elders. And one time I thought to myself, and then when Hardy was not there at the council table or had not doing nothing with the, or whatever, it kind of breaks my heart that because he knows so much about the land claims, island claims, all that. And I was really hoping that one day somebody would bring him back. And I'm really glad that our chief here, Hazel, recognize that and recognize all our elders, like Ron, Henry, and Eugene, all of them, and everybody else that's there. Because this is really important that we need to know these things, that who stands and what we need to do as a community and as our leadership. It's something that really, to me, is really, I'm really blessed by it. And we need to really inform our community band members what's this all about. With me, like what Hardy said, but when he asked that question about, do you know where the boundary lines are? I don't. So I'm going to learn now about these things. And just overwhelmed, and I'm really glad that everybody gave their input and every what they said. It's really like mission what we brought up. It's going to help us. It's going to help us and make us strong, all of us. And then what we're going to have with that a team over there that was written on the board over there. And then so now this view, I think that when you and we're making that step, and we're not backing down, and we're going to take what was really ours, and what was taken from us, and then the chin and them away. I'm glad, and I'm glad I'm part of it. Maybe this much, it really makes me look chin and them about it. I'm sitting with you guys, and listening to you guys. It's really an honor. And Jimmy Witch.
Ani Cecilia Bitton with Wikwemikoong. Jimmy Wedge going on the kidney, Mampini Manjading. I'd like to thank all the former chiefs for their statements, and I guess for the commitment that been expressed by Henry to head up the historical information for the school. And again, Ronnie Rocket about the fishing grounds, the Tomaka National sketch. I'm really grateful for that information, what it means, because I've always kind of wondered what it really means, because a lot of reference has been made to that sketch over the years, and also for Mr. O'Neill's explanation on the without prejudice. Without prejudice. As far as the facilitator for the upcoming negotiation meetings, a lot of the times that the representatives sitting at the table, it seemed like they went prepared, Gina and Domini, looking at the Ontario, and sometimes both parties, Ontario and Canada, but they went prepared. They said, like, we don't have that information, we have to go back. A lot of times those were the replies. And that's, I don't know if that's a tactic or they weren't keeping on top of their files. But that's one thing I noticed when I had gone down to one of the meetings. And even with the caucus sessions, when Ontario came back, they supported us. I think that was a good move on their part. And I guess the next part is to convince Canada of that. As far as maybe also Mr. O'Neill facilitating that, I think that's a really good idea. He's got really good knowledge of our claim, and we've worked with Mr. O'Neill throughout the years, and I think he's very appreciative of our community's efforts.
Chief and band counselors, sorry about missing this morning. I know I missed a lot, but I'll make sure I get the information from my fellow band counselors. I was thinking about what Josh said yesterday when he was part of the island claim, I think in 1992, 94. I'm just wondering if the negotiation team there can also kind of look at what he was saying, if maybe we don't have to put everything through the specific claims. Maybe we should put some of this just through court and take the government to court, especially if it's islands that we never surrendered. And I think when he talked about the specific claims, that's when he talked about negotiations, I guess, for islands that have been sold, that are patent, that we can try and get some compensation for them. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that our chief is working closely with Roland with the process that we're going to go through. It's going to involve a lot of people, the different teams that we're going to have. And I would appreciate even just a monthly one-pager to council, just to make sure that things are happening and to keep track of the, I guess, the process. That way we're constantly being informed. Miigwech.
Because you women and teen enough to up. You know, never more in the morning. You women and kids are thinking of more people. You got one of my pin the geek on them. Miss Fatma Tazian, Pesing one the guy, you get to see. We could have witness no way. The Savannah sea mothers. Mrs. Savannah, me the sea, you got in the statue. Mrs. stuck with arms, and we were not a what the one. You got in the snow and see her. You got in the Savannah sea and see her. Mrs. stuck with arms, and we were a what the one. But that's we know even if we do not store on the start song, the others, and even if we the sing do not store on the song. You can't have enough to go with the snow and see it and the if you go and sing wind when I could stop in the north. You know, the what the mommy is stuck going. You was our nice hands get to the we never asked to them, then you get the new. I will dig into the nasty when the shin goes on a sea. On the one man king a woman the neck to the sinner. Systeming now way. It is a second over to come to give one dead neck and make me wonder. Get to now won't be. Sestava do nós um picho viga dele. Ispanhei tu uma passava nós te bem de bem áreas que eu vou negociar sem stagites não. Que quando bem da anda aqui cada. Cada suma anda aqui cada que porque não vou na we que que não na ina que bem da não ninguém que anda na que bem da não. As we go on the tick being given to what you are doing. They tried to have on them bed. I was our nasi those season, they were the Chicago given to what. He knew some of the kid not even. He never depend on the canoe, the shame you go on the kid. Mr. Kid, you cannot know the what them. And to the souvenir of the joke being, we said, we do not and them can. We met our other guy, we used to see now. This is down on the tree. This is down on the with the what them. Said the guy, we quite as young to the. Just the book being with the talk. Now, we know the get it when they have one, we would not the walk it on. We got
Annie, Maureen, Genishnakas, and we enjoy our livelihood. And I tell them, you know, if we didn't, you know, if we weren't party to the treaties and we didn't sign for the treaties, a lot of the white people would have been here with $1 million homes along the western part of Wikwemikoong. They would have been the ones that were benefiting, but be thankful that we can sit here and enjoy our own land. So she's really thankful that we have these discussions. So we're going to
Honey, bonjour, Nishnabedok. I've been an LRC member on and off for a few years. And sun ma de beatish minage ge go minon gikendan. Up to batti net mandan skwange gine gabe koyain gona Nishnabek. Minadash mandi besko na gina kan gikno ma go see 3D. Me maduna ejiain. I can't keep a my was see move. The swim of Henry Gim that dog mother, he can that's on the kitchen mob. School of Gong, we can no modding Mandanangua. Dik de shuge kuyang gom zeme was a biang maba benoti eskeniget. Kan nang go get in the Zinigen nag sogat in the non we can da see. Shall not just be adam zinigen. Mit der Schmanda pekan der Schmanda maba schgene schnabe pekan der Manda ne is in the sister the maba jaganash mich hab dik one jang gom sie was a biang maba benoti. Of the quick come down now. No, na game on that nos make sketch by Toma nos make kedok. In the sketch, geek can da game of Pinango. It's a sketch by Jagnashak. So we have to caution, and I hope you do look at those papers before they go into publication or as you said, internet. Me will help take come to me. No, launch no go. Magpio, what's going but night about it. Anyway, so I'm really encouraging the chiefs and the ones that are involved in that advisory, the negotiating to get nam in dame. Okay, we get nam in the now, big wedge.